Hello everyone! In this video, we're going to learn about regular expressions in JavaScript. Now before we even worry about what a regular expression is, let's look at the 4 exercises that we're going to work through in this video. In our first exercise, we'll take a look at a situation where a traditional find and replace does not work for us. So this is only 2 lines of text, but imagine instead it was 100 pages worth of text. And imagine we wanted to find all instances of Dwight and replace it with a different name. Well, tragically, a traditional or simple find and replace will not take into account misspellings of that word. However, we can leverage the power of regular expressions to save us here. In our second exercise, we'll take a look at a list of pets that begins with the type of a pet, and then a colon, and then their last name, comma, first name. This format feels a bit stuffy or boring, so what if instead we want to display this text like this? First name, no comma, then last name, and then their species is in a blue rectangle. Well, even if the original list was 5,000 items long, we can use regular expressions to automate that transformation for us. In our third exercise, we'll imagine a situation where you need to choose a username, and it needs to be at least 8 characters long, but not more than 30, and the first character must be a letter, not a number. Now there are many different ways that you could program this, but we're going to learn how to use a regular expression to enforce that logic or those rules. Okay, and finally, in our fourth exercise, we're going to take this block of text, and you can see that it contains different phone numbers. Well, we're going to write a regular expression that not only detects the phone numbers in this block of text, but outputs how many there are and then actually lists them. And you'll notice that up here they're all in a different format. So dashes, dots, spaces. But down in this list, they're using a uniform format. So the idea is that everything below this line was generated dynamically or on the fly or programmatically thanks to a regular expression. Okay, at this point, let's go ahead and jump into exercise number 1, which is just a simple find and replace. If you'd rather type along with me instead of just watching the video, then you can use this CodePen link that I've set up. You can either pause the video and type in this address, or you can find a link to this in the description for this video. Okay, but the idea is we're working with JavaScript, and here we have a string of text. Okay, and then at the moment, I'm just outputting that bit of text onto the DOM or onto the web page. Now, in terms of the actual exercise, imagine that we wrote some things that are not very kind about Dwight. And in order to spare Dwight's feelings, we've decided that we should find and replace all instances of Dwight with a different fictional name. Now, before we worry about actually performing the replacement action, we first want to focus on the finding all instances action. Because remember, even though this is only 2 lines of text, imagine if it was 200 pages worth of text. In that case, with that sort of volume of text, it's safe to assume there's going to be a few misspellings of the word you're looking for. So a simple traditional find and replace would fail. It would leave behind one single dwigged. However, this is an example of when a regular expression can be very helpful. Now, before we write any code within CodePen here, we're first going to experiment within our text editor. This is because most modern text editors have real-time support for regular expressions. To show you what I mean, I want you to first copy this sample text into your clipboard. It doesn't matter if you include the quotes or not, either way is fine, but just copy this block of text into your clipboard and then jump into your text editor. I'm using VS Code, it's what I recommend, but this will also work with Sublime Text or Atom, or probably most other text editors as well. Anyways, go ahead and paste in your clipboard, and now if you press Control F, or on Mac, Command F, this is a traditional find window, right? So it's not rocket science. You know that you could search for Dwight. But notice it's only finding 2 examples because the other example is misspelled. However, let's go ahead and use a regular expression. So look for this icon. It's a dot and then an asterisk. If you're not using VS Code, it might be located somewhere slightly different on your screen, but take a moment to look for this icon. As soon as you click on that, you are now searching for a regular expression. What in the world is a regular expression? Well, think of it as a find tool, but with superpowers. So remember the common misspelling of jwigged? It's missing the H. Well, let's just make the H optional. So in our regular expression, right after the letter H, add a question mark. Within the context of a regular expression, a question mark means the character or character set that comes right before it can happen 0 or 1 time. And notice that with the question mark in place, our text editor is now finding 3 instances of this text. Right? We can see on my screen that jwigged is now selected. It's a match. Now, I realize at this point we have not learned hardly anything about regular expressions. All we've learned is that a question mark makes the thing before it essentially optional. However, before we learn about any other superpowers that regular expressions have, let's put this one into action. Right? If we have this thing that will now find all of the instances that we're looking for, how do we actually replace that with something else? Well, at this point we can jump back over to CodePen and get to work. So right below this line where we have this string of text, I'm going to create a new variable. You can name it anything, but I'm going to name it my name search and set it to equal a regular expression. Now in JavaScript, there's more than one way to create a regular expression, but perhaps the simplest way is to just have 2 forward slashes. Now 2 forward slashes together like this is a comment, but if we type in between these 2 slashes, that will be a regular expression. So here we can just say Dwight, and then right after the H, let's include a question mark, essentially saying that this can happen 0 or 1 time. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. And then at the very end of this, after the ending forward slash, let's be sure to include GI. G stands for global, which means we're not just looking for the first instance of this match within this text. We want to find all instances of it. And the I means case insensitive, right? Because we included an uppercase D for Dwight, but we would also want to match this lowercase Dwight. Okay, so now that we've created this regular expression, how do we actually use it? Remember, we want to replace all instances of Dwight. Well, on a new line of code, we could say, let's create a new variable. I will name it updated story equals, and I would just begin with our original story, right? That's the name of this variable that stores the text. And then in JavaScript, all strings of text have access to a method, so dot, named replace. Now we give the replace method 2 arguments. The first is a regular expression. So in our case, we named our regular expression my name search. So my name search, comma. The second argument is what you want to replace it with. So a pair of quotes, and let's just choose a different fictional name. Why don't we go with Samuel? Okay, and then we want to see this resulting text on the screen, right? We've saved it into this variable, updated story. So then down on this line of code, at the very end of it, instead of story here, just say updated story. Perfect. We see all 3 instances were successfully replaced. Cool. So that was our first taste of seeing a regular expression in action. But we didn't actually learn very much about the different superpowers that a regular expression offers. So let's jump into exercise number 2. In this example, we're going to perform a find and replace again, only this time it's a bit more advanced. So we have this list of pets, and the format is species and then a colon, last name, comma, first name. However, what if instead we want it to look like this? First name, no comma, last name, and then the species is in a blue rectangle. Now, since there's only 3 items in the list, we could change these by hand, but imagine if the list had 5,000 pets, right? Then we would need an automated or programmatic way of transforming the text. So this is where a regular expression can save the day. To get started, let's copy and paste this list of pets into our text editor so we can experiment with regular expressions in real time. So in the description for this video, you can find a link to exercise number 2, and then down in the preview area here, just copy these 3 lines. Okay, back in our text editor, I will clear everything out and paste in. Okay, and again, before we worry about the replace or modify action, we first need to focus on the find or match action. So what we need to do is write a regular expression that matches this format or this pattern of a word and then a colon and then a space, another word, comma, space, another word. Once we've described this pattern in the form of a regular expression, it's then a piece of cake to move around and modify and replace it however we want. Let's begin by trying to match this first chunk of the pattern. Right, the word or words and then the colon. So Control or Command F. Make sure that your regular expression option is selected. Okay, now if I look for cat colon, obviously that matches the first row. Or if I type young dog. But the question is, how would we match all of these with one search or one regular expression? Well, first, let's just focus on the very first letter of these 3 pets. So instead of only matching for the letter C or only matching for the letter Y, in a regular expression, if we have a pair of square brackets, this will create a character set. So inside these curly brackets, let's include the first letter of cat, the first letter of young dog, and the first letter of rabbit. So you can see that also matches the R in barks a lot and the Y in fluffy. However, after this character set, let's open up another character set. So square brackets, and then let's include the second letter in cat, the second letter in young dog, and the second letter in rabbit. Well, we don't need A twice, so just AO. So now our regular expression is going to search for any of these characters directly followed by any of these characters. So then after that, you could include a letter like just T, see, and that would match cat, or U, and that would match the beginning of young, or B, and that would match the beginning of rabbit. So a regular expression really works character by character. But the idea is that with a character set, you're allowing multiple characters for that placement in the search. And that's great. This can be very powerful. Except you and I are not psychics. So in the real world, we're not going to be able to hard code this to the specific first letters of the items because we don't know what they're going to be, right? There could be 5,000 pets. So instead, we can create a character set from A through Z. Now you can see that's going to match every letter. So it matches everything except the colon, the spaces, and the commas. Okay, and then after that, we could have another character set of A through Z. Then we could have a third one, A through Z, and then a colon. This is where things start to get interesting. So now we can see it matches cat because that's 3 characters long and then a colon. The same thing is true for dog. However, rabbit is 6 characters long. So it's only going to grab the last 3 characters before it finds the matching semicolon as well. Now, our first instinct might be to just include 6 of these instead of only 3, right? And then that would match rabbit. Now, instead of typing this out 6 times, what you can actually do is just type it out once, and then directly following it, we can have a pair of curly brackets, and in between there, you can include a number. So if we wanted to look for that 3 times in a row, you can just say 3, or if we wanted 4, or 5, or 6. So this is going to look for any continuous 6 letters of the alphabet that is not being interrupted by a space or a comma or a colon. Or at the end of it, we could add a colon, and then that's only going to match the rabbit colon. But this still isn't flexible enough for us. However, the good news is that this curly bracket syntax that lets us find X or N number of occurrences is a bit more powerful than just accepting one option. So check this out. Instead of 6, we could say 1 or 2. Let's just say 1. And then still within those curly brackets, say comma 4. Before I explain what's going on here, let's just visually see what's going on with the matches. So that's going to match the last 4 letters and then the colon of rabbit. If we change this 4 to a 5, and if we change it to a 6, even better. So this syntax is going to look for whatever came before it, in this case, this character set, a minimum of 1 time and a maximum of 6 times in a row. Now in this case, hard coding this to a value of 6 made sense because we know the word rabbit in advance. But if we want this to be truly flexible, just don't include the 6. Just say 1 comma and then nothing. And then we can see even if we modified rabbit to be big, fluffy rabbit, it still matches all of the letters and then the colon. So this syntax says match this many times or more. Now right now I want to show you a bit of a shortcut. When you're interested in this exact scenario of 1 or more times, we don't need to spell this out. We can actually just say plus symbol. A plus symbol is the exact same thing as the curly brackets 1 comma nothing, right? 1 or more times. So there are these little shortcuts that can help us out in regular expressions. There's the plus symbol. In our first exercise, we used the question mark after the H in Dwight. The question mark is equivalent to saying curly brackets 0, comma 1. So the question mark is shorthand for saying this can occur 0 or 1 time. Okay, but in this case, we just want the plus symbol. Cool, now back to the task at hand. In terms of matching the first chunk of our pattern, we're looking good except we're not matching young and then a space. So within this character set, after the Z, you could just hit the space bar on your keyboard. Or if I hit backspace, we can say backslash lowercase s. This will look for any white space character like a space or a tab, so on and so forth. The reason we need the backslash is because we are escaping the s. Because if you didn't have the backslash, the regular expression would just think we're looking for the literal letter of lowercase s. So we want backslash s. Cool, so now you can see young space dog colon is a match. Now before we move on to the next chunks in the pattern, right, a space and then a word and then a comma, let's review everything we have so far big picture. We have a character set, these square brackets. We're looking for letters A through Z, or we're looking for a white space character. And we're looking for that 1 or more times, right? Essentially as many times as it occurs before it's directly followed by a colon. Okay, and now let's begin working on the next chunk of the pattern. So after the colon, we would want to look for a space, so backslash s. Okay, then let's look for a character set, so square brackets. In between them, let's look for A through Z. After that character set, let's include a plus symbol and then a comma. Okay, and then if we look at our pattern, there should be a space. So again, backslash s. And then to match the first name, let's just have another character set, A through Z. And after that character set, a plus symbol to match it 1 or more times. Cool, so at this point, our regular expression matches the entire pattern or format for each pet. However, since we want to move or rearrange the way that this text is lined up, right, remember our goal is to format it like this, first name, last name, blue rectangle for species. Well, since that's our goal, we want to use something called capturing groups. Essentially, within our regular expression, if we wrap a section in parentheses, well, it's almost like we're naming or labeling that section so we can access it later on. Let me show you what I mean. So the first capturing group that we would want to set up is the species. Now we do not want the colon within this capturing group. We just want to be able to access the actual species text. So at the very start of our regular expression, even before the opening square bracket, I will have an opening parentheses. And then right before the colon, so right after the plus symbol, I would have a closing parentheses. Okay, now we don't need the colon or the space within our next capturing group, which is the last name. We also don't want the comma in the last name. So right before the square bracket for this next character set, I would have an opening parentheses. And then right after this plus symbol, I would have the closing parentheses. Okay, and then in the final capturing group, which will be the first name, we don't need the comma or the space, so right before the next character set, opening parentheses, and then finally at the very end, after the final plus symbol, closing parentheses. Okay, if the whole idea of capturing groups in the parentheses doesn't make sense right now, I think it'll make sense in about 40 seconds from now. So at this point, we're ready to move this regular expression over to CodePen and actually make the replacements or the modifications happen. So I want you to select the entire regular expression that we just wrote and copy it into your clipboard. Okay, and then let's jump over to CodePen. And up in the code section, right below this variable where we have this array of the pet data, right below that, let's just create a new constant variable. Let's name it pet pattern. You could name this variable anything, that's just what I'm going with, and set it to equal 2 forward slashes to create a regular expression, and in between those slashes, just paste in your clipboard. Okay, and at the very end of this line, even after that forward slash, I want you to include an I for case insensitive, because we only included lowercase a through z, but we would also want to match the uppercase letters of their names. Now, our text editor software will make our regular expression case insensitive by default, but when we're programming for the web browser, we do need to include this. Okay, now down here we already have a bit of code that's going to look at the array of pets and output an unordered list where each pet gets an HTML list item. So that's what we see down here. So that's working with the original array of pets, which is just named pets. That's what we see up here. So let's do this. Right below the line where we created our regular expression, let's create a new constant variable. Let's name it pets updated and set it to equal. And we just want to create a new array based on that original array. So the original array was named pets. So let's just say pets.map. Map will call a function that we give it once for each item in the array. So let's give it an arrow function with exactly one parameter. So let's name the parameter pet and then an arrow symbol. And for now, just as a test, let's literally just return the exact same incoming value. Only just as a test, so we can see it down here, let's say .to uppercase. Okay, now we would actually want to output this array to the web page. So down in this code, when we're generating the HTML, instead of working with the pets array, we would want to work with the pets updated array. Cool, so now down in the preview area, you can see that they've been converted to uppercase. Now that's not what we actually want, that was just a test. So within our pets updated line, get rid of the .to uppercase and the parentheses to call that uppercase method. Okay, so we're working with the original string of text, and this is where we circle back to regular expressions. We know that a string of text has access to the replace method. So we give replace 2 arguments. The first is the regular expression you want to use. Remember, we named ours pet pattern, so pet pattern, comma, the second argument is what you want to replace it with. Let's give it a pair of single quotes so that we can use double quotes inside them if we want to. Okay, and remember, our goal is to restructure the text so that it begins with the animal's first name. And remember, the first name was the third capturing group that we set up. So to access the capturing group, it's just a $sign and then whatever number it is. So the third capturing group, there we see the first name. Then we would want a space and then their last name, which was the second capturing group. So $2. Okay, and then we wanted to end with the species, which was the first capturing group. So $1. Only remember, we wanted to wrap the species in a blue rectangle. So we can just set up a bit of HTML. Let's wrap $1 within an HTML span tag. And on the opening tag, just give it a class of description. Perfect. And that completes exercise number 2. Now, before we jump into exercise number 3, I do want to say that if you're enjoying this video, you might also enjoy my premium feature-length courses. Just last week, I completely updated my workflow course to meet the trends and demands of the industry for 2019 and 2020. So we've ditched jQuery, we've ditched Gulp in favor of Webpack, And I've also added brand new chapters on how to use the Netlify service, as well as the very basics of cloud functions or AWS Lambda functions. Another course that I think you might enjoy is my full stack JavaScript course that just came out a few months ago. In addition to learning the JavaScript language itself, we also learn Node, Express, MongoDB, and we create a super simple miniature little social network application. In the description for this video, you'll find heavily discounted coupon links to join either one of these courses. Okay, having said that, let's get back to regular expressions and let's jump into exercise number 3. In this exercise, we want to use a regular expression to enforce our rules or logic on the usernames that a user can choose. So you can only use alphanumeric characters, you must begin with a letter, not a number, and the length of the username must be between 8 and 30 characters. And the idea is that after every keystroke, we will show an appropriate either error or success message right here. So if we take a look at the existing code, I've already set things up so that after every keystroke on this input, JavaScript is going to call a function named usernameChangeHandler. And when that function gets called, it's going to pass it whatever value the user has currently typed in as the argument. So let's scroll down and find that function, usernameChangeHandler. You can see I've written a comment here. Use your regular expression here to test if user input is valid or not. So if it is valid, if it meets our rules, then call the showGood function. If not, call the showBad function. Okay, and then up here I have a comment. Create a regular expression here that does the following, and then I've explained the rules or logic for the username. So right below that, let's create a constant variable. We could name it anything, but let's name it username pattern. And let's set it to equal a regular expression. So in between these two forward slashes, we want to make sure that the first character is a letter, not a number. So let's have a character set, A through Z. Okay, now after that first character, you are allowed to include numbers. So let's have another character set, and I will say A through Z, but also 0 through 9. Okay, now if we want the overall username to be at least 8 characters long, well, we know that the first mandatory letter takes up 1 slot, so then we would want this pattern to match at least 7 times. So after that character set, I would have curly brackets, and I would say 7, and then we don't want the username to exceed 30 characters. So I would say 7, 29. Okay, and then to make this case insensitive, at the very end after the slash, I would just include an I. Okay, so we've got our regular expression. Now let's actually apply it whenever the user types into this field. So if we scroll down, you'll find this empty function named usernameChangeHandler. So within the body of this function, let's say an if statement. So if parentheses, curly brackets. For the condition inside the parentheses, let's say if, and then let's begin working with our regular expression. So username pattern, and in JavaScript, regular expressions have access to a method named test. So here we can include a string of text, and if it's a match, test will return with a value of true. Otherwise, it will return with a value of false. So in the test parentheses, just include user input, right? Whatever value the user has typed into this field. Okay, now within the if curly brackets, in between those we can drop down. After the closing curly bracket, let's also have an else block. Okay, now if this is true, let's call a function named showGood, uppercase G. This function will just show the success message instead of this rule or error message. In the else block, just call showBad, and that's an uppercase B, and that will just make sure that this red message is appearing. Okay, now let's test things out. So down in the preview, if we start typing into this field, you'll notice that as soon as I reach 8 characters long, we see a congrats or success message. However, we do need to make a couple of changes to our regular expression, because right now, once we make a match, we are free to include whatever we want. Now, these characters should absolutely not be allowed. These are not alphanumeric characters. They're not A through Z, 0 through 9. The issue is that because this portion is a successful match, our regular expression doesn't continue to look. It just says, yes, I found a match, the test was successful. To get around this, here's what we can do. So scroll back up to where we are defining our regular expression. And right after the curly brackets for 7,29, I want you to include the dollar symbol. This way, it will only be considered a match if this is coming at the end of the input. So now if we try this, it's a successful match, but if I add non-alphanumeric characters, cool, we see the error or rule message. Now, on a related note, we also want to pay attention to the fact that a user should not be able to add random bogus things at the beginning of the username. Right? This is a problem as well. This is considered a match because these are 8 characters that match our rule. So to fix this up in our regular expression, we just want to begin with a caret symbol. This way, it's only considered a match if this comes at the very beginning of the input. So now if I try this, that's valid, but if I add something weird at the beginning, it doesn't work. Perfect. So you must begin with a letter, but you are free to use numbers anywhere else. But if we go over 30 characters long, cool, we see the error message as well. That completes this example. Now let's move on to our fourth and final exercise. In this example, we have a block of text that contains different phone numbers. And down in the preview area, you can see that that's all that's being output. It's just that block of text. However, our goal is to have it look like this. So we use a regular expression to dynamically count how many matches of phone numbers there are in this block of text. And then also we output a list of them, and you'll notice that I've cleaned up the formatting. So instead of some of them using no separation or dots or dashes or spaces or parentheses around the area code, you can see that this just uses one uniform format. Now, I do want to address that in this example, I'm approaching phone numbers from where I live in the world. I realize there are different formats depending on where you live. So if that's the case, then just don't take this example so literally. You can still take the same regular expression concepts and adapt them to meet your telephone format. So big picture, this exercise is not actually about phone numbers as much as it's just a chance to practice with regular expressions. Okay, at this point, let's get started. So in the description for this video, you can find this CodePen link. And I want us to get started by copying this block of text over to your text editor. So just copy over in VS Code or whatever you're using, just paste it in. Okay, and then Control F or Command F, and let's start writing a regular expression. Now, before we worry about the 3-digit area code and the potential leading 1, let's start by looking for 3 digits and then an optional separator and then 4 more digits. So for our regular expression, let's begin with a character set, so square brackets, and we can say 0 through 9. We can see that matches every single number in the text block, but then after that we can say curly brackets, 3. Now again, I'm working with this selected part of the pattern. I want to get this up and running, and then we can backtrack and set up the 1 in the area code. So we've just selected 3 digits in a row. Now let's add an optional space. So it can be a white space character or a dot or a dash. So I would include another character set, square brackets, and say dash, dot, or a white space character. So \S. Okay, now that is optional. There might be nothing in between the 3 digits and the 4 digits. So let's include a question mark after that character set. And then we'd want to listen for 4 digits in a row. So square brackets, in between there we can say 0 through 9. After that, curly brackets, and we're looking for that happening 4 times in a row. Cool, so you can see that's already matching all of the phone numbers. But now we need to work on the area code and the potential leading 1. Actually, before we jump into that, I want to show you a shortcut. Instead of defining a character set of 0 through 9, we can actually instead just say \d for digit. So that's a nice little shortcut. So not only do you not need the 0 through 9, you don't need these square brackets to create a character set. So we can do that here as well. Get rid of the square brackets 0 through 9, just say \d. So an escaped lowercase d is for digit. And in our previous lesson, instead of creating a character set for A through Z, 0 through 9, we could have just said \lowercase w, which is a shortcut for any alphanumeric character. Now, even though I like working within a text editor because you can see immediate visual feedback of what's being matched, I actually want to move over to CodePen at this point, because we still need to look for the area code, any potential parentheses, and the potential leading one. And I'm not going to be able to fit the entire regular expression on my screen in this little input box. So let's jump over to CodePen. So right now I want you to select your entire regular expression so far and copy it into your clipboard. Okay, over in CodePen, below all of this existing JavaScript, let's drop down and create a new constant variable. We could name it anything, but let's call it phone pattern equals, and then 2 forward slashes to create a regular expression. In between, just paste. At the very end of this line, after this forward slash, be sure to include a G for global. Right? We don't just want to match the first occurrence of that pattern. We want to match all of them in this block of text. Okay, now before we finish this regular expression to look for the area code, the potential parentheses, the leading one, let's set things up so that we begin to output our results below this block of text. Let me show you how we would do that. So below this line where we just created this regular expression, let's create a variable. This time I'm going to use let instead of const. I'll explain why in just a moment, but let's say let results equal, and then we want to begin working with this block of text. So it's in a variable named story. And in JavaScript, strings of text have access to a method named match. We only need to give it one argument, and that is a regular expression. So we named ours phone pattern. All right, now match is going to return an array of all the matches that it found in the text. However, if it finds 0 matches, it doesn't return an empty array, it returns null. So what I like to do to make things really flexible and to make sure that I don't run into errors if I don't find any matches is this. I like to say if parentheses, curly brackets, and for the condition I will just say exclamation results. So if we don't find any matches in a block of text, match is going to return null, and null will evaluate to false within our if statement. So without the exclamation, we'd be saying if results evaluates to true, and then the exclamation checks for the opposite. So if results evaluates to false, what do we want to do? Well, if we stay on one line of code here, we don't even need the curly brackets. We can just say results should now equal an empty array, so square brackets. This is why I created results using let instead of const, because I wanted to be able to update its value if I needed to. The reason I do this is so now we can use the array methods on results without worrying about an error popping up if it was null. Let me show you what I mean. So at this point, let's work on outputting the extra bit of text down here that says there are X number of phone numbers in this block of text. So to do that, we can save a bit of typing by just duplicating this line of code here. This document.querySelector line, just copy that into your clipboard, and then down at the very bottom here, paste it in. And then at the end here, instead of outputting story once again, let's change story to a pair of backticks. This is the character right above the tab key or to the left of your 1 key. Now in between the backticks, you're free to drop down. Let's begin by outputting a horizontal rule, right? A line across the screen. And then let's also output a paragraph element and say there are X phone numbers in this string of text. Only we don't actually want this to say X, we would want this to be the count, or however many numbers we found. So instead of the X, we can say $curly brackets, and in between those brackets, say results dot length. Right? Every array in JavaScript has a length property that counts how many items are in it. So if we check the preview, perfect. There are 8 phone numbers in this string of text. And to make sure our code is flexible, if our block of text didn't have any numbers in it, you can see we don't run into any errors. We just say there are 0 phone numbers. Cool. Let me press Control or Command Z to put that back. And let's finish our regular expression. Because remember, right now, we are not finding the area code, the optional parentheses, or the leading one. So we need to find that, because if we look at our finished product, we want to actually output the phone numbers down at the very bottom. So right now, jump back to this line of code where we define our regular expression, and let's get our hands dirty. So right after the opening / to begin our regular expression, let's look for an optional leading one at the very beginning, even before the 3-digit area code. So just the number 1 and then a question mark because it's optional. Okay, and then I would want to look for an optional separator after that leading one. So character set or square brackets, and I'm looking for either a dash or a dot or a white space character. Or none of these could be there because the separator character is optional. So question mark after that character set. Okay, now before we actually look for the 3-digit area code, I want to look for the potential parentheses surrounding the area code. Now within our regular expression, we can't just type opening parentheses because that's how you create a capturing group. If we want to actually look for the opening parentheses character, we need to escape it or include a backslash and then opening parentheses. Okay, but that opening parentheses is optional, so then a question mark. Next, we'd want to look for the actual 3-digit area code. So just \D for digit, and then we want that 3 times in a row, so curly brackets, in between that, 3. After that closing curly bracket, I now want to look for the optional closing parentheses around the area code. So \, closing parentheses, and that's optional, so then question mark. Okay, and then in between the area code and the next 3 digits is an optional separator. So then I would create a character set, square brackets, and I'm looking for either a dash, a dot, or a white space character. Or there might be nothing, so after that character set, make it optional with a question mark. Okay, that completes the regular expression for now. At this point, let's output the actual list of phone numbers below our count text down here. So towards the very bottom of our JavaScript, right below this P paragraph element, let's drop down, still within the closing backtick, and let's create an unordered list in HTML. And then inside it, we want to do something once for each item in our array. To do something dynamic, let's say $ curly brackets. Inside that, let's say results.map. Right after the parentheses to call map, let's also say .join, and just give that an empty pair of quotes. So not even a space in between the quotes, just 2 quotes. Okay, now in the map parentheses, we want to give it an arrow function that it will run once for each item in the array. So we want this arrow function to have exactly 1 parameter. Let's just call it x, arrow symbol, and then let's give it backticks, and we want to generate a bit of HTML. So a list item element, and in between the opening and closing tag, do something dynamic with $ curly brackets, and just say that parameter, so x. If we take a look at the preview, cool, you'll know that you typed in the regular expression correctly if this list includes the area code and the optional 1 for this phone number. At this point, we only need to take care of one more detail, and that is making these phone numbers use a uniform or standardized format. To make this happen, we're going to use capturing groups. Personally, I don't want the leading one to be in my uniform list, so I'm not going to include that in any of the groups. So I'm going to create my first capturing group around the 3-digit area code. So right before the backslash, before the D, I will include an opening parentheses. And then to close that capturing group, right after the 3 and then the closing curly brackets, include a closing parentheses. Okay, let's create another capturing group around the next 3 digits. So right before this backslash lowercase d, opening parentheses. right after the 3 closing curly bracket, closing parentheses, and then do the same thing for the final 4 digits. So right before the \d, opening parentheses, right after 4 closing curly brackets, include a closing parentheses. Okay, now that alone won't change anything. Our preview will still look exactly the same, but now we can use this to perform a replacement. Let me show you what I mean. Maybe right below these 2 lines of code where we say let results equal and if exclamation results. Let's drop down right below that and let's create one more new variable. Let's say const results uniform should equal, and then I just want to create a new array based on our results array. So I would say results.map. In these parentheses, I would just say x, arrow symbol. X is the original phone number from our original array. It's a string, so we can run dot replace, and we know that replace takes 2 arguments. The first is a regular expression, which would be phone pattern, comma. The second argument is the way that we want to restructure it or modify it. So let's just have a pair of single quotes, and in between them, this is just personal preference, but in my uniform format, maybe I want to wrap the area code in parentheses. So parentheses, inside that say $1 to get the first capturing group. And then I want a space, and then capture group number 2. And then again, it's just personal preference, but I want a dash. And then I want capture group number 3. Okay, now let's actually output this results uniform. So down towards the very bottom of our JavaScript, when we're just counting how many items are in the array, that can still be results. But when it comes to actually outputting the items, instead of results.map, let's say results uniform.map. Okay, and if we check the preview output area, perfect. Now they're all using that exact same format that we just came up with. And that's going to bring this exercise and this video to a close. Really quick, I do want to say that we've only covered about 5 to 10% of what's possible with regular expressions. If you want to learn more, I recommend checking out this website. If you Google for JavaScript regular expression, this should be the first result, but you can also find this link in the description of this video. Towards the top here, it mentions all of the different ways that you can leverage a regular expression. And then if we scroll down a bit, there's this super useful table. The left-hand column has the different characters that you can use in a regular expression, and then this side explains exactly what it is. So you'll find the caret, the $sign, the asterisk, the plus symbol, question mark, you get the idea. So we definitely did not cover everything that's possible with regular expressions in this video. But the idea is that just scrolling through this documentation on your own can be very daunting. So hopefully this video gave you an idea of where to start, where to begin, how to experiment. And from there, the sky is really the limit. You can take it as far as you need to. Anyways, that's going to bring this to a close. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you feel like you learned something. And stay tuned for more web development tutorials. And again, if you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy my premium full-length courses. There's links to them in the description of this video.